I love this book. Don't hit myself in the face. Hey guys, it's Kemmerer, and today I have for you my July TBR. Really great reading month in the month of July. I read 20 books, I know. So we're gonna start with all of my reading stats because I love putting a bunch of reading stats in these videos. So we're gonna start with genre. So I read 2 contemporary books, 12 fantasy books, 2 sci-fi books, 1 mystery/thriller novel, 1 historical fiction novel, 1 classic, and 1 nonfiction. It's been a while since I've read a nonfiction, so I felt pretty good about that one as well. Then we're gonna move on to rating. So my average rating for the month was 4.25 stars, which is a little bit lower than I would like it to be. I usually want it to be above 4.5 stars because that means I got a lot of books that I really ended up loving. But this month, I didn't have as many of those. I only had 5 5-star books this month. I had 5 4.5-star books, 6 4-star books, 3 3.5-star books, and 1 2.5-star book. So by age range, I ended up reading 11 adult books, 7 young adult books, which is crazy. I generally don't read that much young adult at all, so like I don't know how that happened, but I ended up reading a ton of young adult this month. I also read 1 middle grade book and then 1 book that doesn't really have an age range, so 1 miscellaneous book. Next is by page count, so I'll put a little chart on the screen with the page counts that I read. I did read a lot of like higher page count books because I read a lot of like fantasy this month, if you guys couldn't tell. And I had an average page count of 459 pages, which is actually pretty high for an average page count. So I'm really happy about that one too, because I try to read longer books generally because I read a lot of fantasy, so I like reading longer books. 459 pages for an average page count is still really high since most books are like in the 300 range. And then the one I am like the most proud of is the audiobook to physical book ratio. So I ended up reading 11 physical books, 1 ebook, which it's been a while since I've read an ebook, so I was pretty happy about that also, and only 8 audiobooks. So I read tons of physical books this month, which like never happens. Like if I ever meet that, like my goal of 8 physical books a month, like it's very rare that I actually meet that goal. So I was like really happy this month that I like managed to actually read more than 8 books. I actually managed to read more physical books than audiobooks. And generally I put physical books and ebooks like in the same category. So like a 12:8 ratio is really good. That's like the best one that I've had ever. So I'm really happy about that one also. So now we're gonna move on to my reading goals. So like my main reading goals are to read 1 classic, 1 sci-fi, 1 historical fiction, 1 mystery/thriller novel, and 1 book over 700 pages. So for my classic book, I ended up reading Wuthering by Emily Bronte. For my sci-fi book, I read Babylon's Ashes by James S.A. Corey. For my historical fiction novel, I read Where the Crawdads Sings by Delia Owens. For my mystery/thriller novel, I read The Girl Who Played with Fire by Stieg, Larrson. And for my book over 700 pages, I actually have a lot that I can pick from, but I'm just going to pick the longest one, and that's Fool's Fate by Robin Hobb, which is 914 pages, and I read it in 2 days. Like, I was so into this series, so yes. Definitely love this one. And I'll be talking about all of those later on in the video. Like I mentioned, I did read more than 8 physical books this month, so I met that goal also. The last one that I have to talk about is my book buying ban challenge. So I have to read these 30 books on this list of books that I made before I can buy any more books. I will link the video where I explain all of that in the cards, but overall, I really like this challenge, but I'm ready for it to be over. Like, I really want to get back to buying some books. I was really hoping to get it done before August because The Dragon Republic is coming out in August and I still have like half the books to read. So that's not gonna happen, but I need to get it done before November because between The Queen of Nothing, The Toll, The Starless Sea, and Starsight, like there are so many new releases happening in November that I just cannot wait for, and I need to buy those books. So I need this challenge to be over. In the month of July, I did make a pretty good dent in it. I ended up reading 5 books from that challenge. So these are the 5 books that I read from that challenge, and I will be talking about these a little bit later as well. So I did not have any DNFs in the month of July, so I'm gonna be skipping that. And I also didn't have any actual rereads in the month of July, which makes me sad because I love rereading books, but I didn't get to any of those, so I'll be skipping that one as well. But I did actually read a nonfiction book, so we're gonna talk about that one first. So the nonfiction book that I read in the month of July is Save the Cat Writes a Novel by Jessica Brody. So those of you who are writers out there, you've probably heard of this book before. It's very popular, especially on AuthorTube, I think. I've heard a lot of people have read this book, and the tagline for the book is the last book on novel writing that you'll ever need. I completely disagree with that tagline. 100% disagree with that tagline. Not that you shouldn't read this book. I think it's a necessary book. I think it's a book that every commercial fiction author should definitely read. But I feel like this is the first book a writer should read, not the last one. This gives you a very good foundation, but there's so much more to writing than what is in this book. So that's really all I want to say about it. I don't talk too much about the nonfiction, especially ones like this, on this channel. So yeah, I didn't enjoy this book as much as I wanted to, because everyone talks about this book as the Bible for writers, and it's not. At least not in my opinion. I've read other books about writing that are much better than this one, so I felt like it was a little elementary. That's all I'm really gonna say about it. I do think it's a good book, and if you haven't read any other writing books or haven't read very many, I think this one is a really great one if you want to read these types of books. So I ended up giving this one 4 stars. So now we're gonna move on to all of the fiction books that I read for the first time in the month of July. I'm gonna start with my lowest rated book and work my way up to my highest rated book. The first book that I want to talk about is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. This is my classic for the month, and it really let me down. I was hoping that I would end up loving this book because I like classics that are similar to it in the fact that, for example, Pride and Prejudice is one of those more romantic classics, and that's kind of what Wuthering Heights sort of is, but it sort of also isn't. I had higher hopes for this one than I normally would, because I've heard a lot of people don't like this one because the characters are unlikable. Problem is, I love unlikable characters. I absolutely love unlikable characters, but I like unlikable characters that are well developed, and I don't feel like that is the case for these characters. So I was looking for some good, well developed, unlikable characters, and I just didn't get that. And I didn't really care for the story very much. It was told in an odd way, it's told from the perspective of someone visiting Wuthering Heights, and they're piecing together the story. They're being told the history of this place by someone who wasn't actually part of the story that they're telling. They were on the sidelines of the story. They weren't one of the main characters in the story. So it isn't an old-fashioned way. I understand a lot of stories are told this way, but I didn't enjoy it. That's really all I have to say about it. I gave it 2.5 stars because I didn't hate it the way I feel a lot of people hate it, but I didn't love it. I just felt meh about it, which I feel that's a good 2.5 star rating. It's halfway between 1 and 5 stars. So yeah, that's how I felt about it, and don't really have very much to say about this otherwise. If you guys have very different feelings for this book than I do, please let me know down in the comments, because I would love to hear from someone who loves this book, because I feel you can have a very different opinion from me. I remember the sections where the quoted sections, there are a few sections that are often quoted, and I just remember hearing those sections and feeling I've heard these quotes before, and I understood them better in the books that they were quoted in than in this book in general, because this book, I didn't feel the build up to those lines in the way that I did in the other books that quote this book. So I just felt it wasn't a very good classic. Yeah, that might be an unpopular opinion, so let me know if you really like this book, because I'd love to hear from you guys. So the next book that I want to talk about is Days of Blood and Starlight by Laini Taylor. I love Laini Taylor. I love her writing style. I think it's so beautiful. I didn't enjoy this book as much as I wanted to. I ended up giving this one 3.5 stars, so it's not a bad rating by any means. I think part of the reason is I don't really have very much of an attachment to the characters in this book, and I was just way more interested in the backstories of these characters, of what happened previously, than I was in what was currently happening in this book. So while I enjoyed the reading experience a lot because I love Laini Taylor's writing style and the imagery that she uses, I didn't actually care very much for the plot of the story, which is why it ended up only getting 3.5 stars. So the next book that I would like to talk about is Babylon's Ashes by James S.A. Corey. This is the 6th book in the Expanse series. I didn't enjoy this one one as much as I enjoyed the other ones. Like, if this was the first book in the series, I don't think I would continue on with the series. I didn't have the pull for this book as I wanted to. Like, I remember, like, as I was reading this book, thinking back to the first book and being like, what happened to, like, the awesome action scenes that happened in the first book, and the, like, the kind of life and death feeling that I got from the first book, and that just feeling of, like, something worse is coming. Like, that's how I felt in the first book. Like, there was just this ominous presence in that first book, and I feel like in this one, that's just, it was completely gone. The whole atmosphere of the story just felt completely different, and it started feeling almost more like a contemporary novel, which is weird because it's a sci-fi novel, but like I was getting that vibe from it in a way that I didn't like. Like, I don't mind it when sci-fi and fantasy novels start feeling like contemporary novels, if it's done in a way that I like it, but if it's done in a different way, I don't like it. I think part of the reason is the characters in this book aren't necessarily very deep characters. Like, yes, they are. They're not, like, overly developed. They're sci-fi characters. They're sci-fi action characters who we don't really need to know that much about to like them. And I feel like this book was trying to get us to, like, love them in a way that it's just not gonna happen for me, if that makes sense. Like, I liked that the last book in the series got a little bit more into, like, their backstories, but, like, this one, it was trying to get more of an emotional impact for me from, like, the current present day stuff, and it wasn't happening. So, yeah, I ended up giving this one 3.5 stars. I'm still gonna continue on with the series because I do have faith in this author team. I do have faith in this story that it could get better. Like, sometimes book series have lulls, and there are some books that are not as good as the other books in the series. It's okay. Caliban's War was not very great compared to Leviathan Wakes. For those of you who haven't read the Expanse series, Caliban's War is the second book, Leviathan Wakes is the first book. But you know what? Abaddon's Gate and Cibola Burn, the third and fourth books in this series, were so much better than Caliban's War. So, like, it's fine if one is not as good as the other ones. I'm just really hoping that Persepolis Rising, the next book in this series, and Tiamat's Wrath, the book after that one, is a lot better than Babylon's Ashes, because right now I'm not enjoying this as much as I wanted to. Like, I really, really wanted to love this one, and it just didn't happen for me this time. Now we're gonna move on to the books that I rated 4 stars. So the first one is an audiobook that I borrowed from my library. It's The Lost Sisters by Holly Black. This is a novella that is supposed to take place in between The Cruel Prince and The Wicked King, and it is a letter to Jude from her sister Taryn, kind of about Taryn's story basically in The Cruel Prince, which we kind of got an idea of what was going on in The Cruel Prince about what Taryn was doing, but I actually really liked hearing from Taryn's perspective. I ended up only giving it 4 stars though, because one, it wasn't as, like, good as I wanted it to be, because, I mean, I went into it with, like, 0 expectations, so I was expecting it to be maybe as good as The Cruel Prince was, which I loved The Cruel Prince, and I wasn't expecting to love The Cruel Prince, but I ended up really loving it. So, like, in that sense, like, it was good for what it was, but it was just really short. It was only 50 pages, like, an hour for an audiobook. Like, it was really, really short. And it wasn't, like, heart-rending or anything like that. Like, I kind of knew the story already from what I surmised from The Cruel Prince. So, like, I enjoyed it. It was, like, a nice, quick read, but overall, like, I don't think it was necessary for the series overall, which is why I ended up only giving it 4 stars. I did enjoy it, but it wasn't, like, blow my mind amazing or anything like that. The next book I want to talk about is We Hunt the Flame by Hafsah Faizal. This book I read because of the Untitled Chapter tag that I did, and I actually did do a full review on it, which I will link up in the cards if you guys want to watch that. I really enjoyed this book a lot more than I was expecting to. I love the writing in this book. I love the world building in this book. It's about a character named Zafira, who I love also. Fantastic character, and she basically has this mission to bring magic back to the world, which will save her people, which is very, like, stereotypical fantasy, but I really, really liked the way the world was done in here, and I loved the characters. I did not necessarily enjoy the plot of the novel that much. I felt like there were some things that just kind of, like, came out of nowhere, and then there were other things that were really built up that led nowhere. But overall, I did really enjoy it, and there is, like, a little bit of a romance in here. For those of you who don't like that, I actually do enjoy that when I root for the romance, and I was rooting for this romance, so I enjoyed that aspect of the novel as well. So I definitely recommend this one. and I ended up giving this one 4 stars as well. The next book I want to talk about is The Queen of the Tearling by Erika Johannsen. I picked this book up on a complete whim. I was just feeling like reading more YA fantasy. I very rarely get the urge to just read YA fantasy, especially considering the amount of YA books that I read this month, but I just had the urge to do it, and I didn't have anything else on my TBR that was YA fantasy, and this has been on my shelf for like a year now, so I just decided to pick it up, and I enjoyed it so much. Like, I was not expecting to enjoy this book as much as I did, because I've heard a lot of like not as great things about this book, but one thing I really enjoyed about this book, one, is the main character Kelsey, who is a princess who's been in hiding for a really long time, but she's turning, I think it's 19, and so she's gonna be able to take her crown back, basically. I loved her character. She's such a strong like princess character, and she's very political in a way that you wouldn't really expect for someone so young, and I love that about her, and I love the way she like commands respect of the people around her. I absolutely loved the politics in this book. I feel like a lot of YA books don't really look at the politics in their fantasy world that much. Like, they will have a little bit of it, but I felt like the politics were really rich and deep in a way that you don't really get a whole lot in YA books, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. So I'm very, very excited to continue on with this series. I did only give this one 4 stars because it didn't have as much action as I would have wanted from the first book in a series, but I'm hoping that the next 2 books in the series do have a lot of action, so I might end up loving this series overall. But overall, did really, really enjoy this book and super excited to continue on. The next book that I'd like to talk about is The Broken Eye by Brent. This is the 3rd book in the Lightbringer series. I was so excited for this book. Like, watching back my July TBR, like, I was so excited for this book, and it was a little bit of a disappointment. Like, obviously I still enjoyed it. I ended up giving it 4 stars, but like, this was a 5-star prediction for me. Like, I thought that I was finally gonna get a 5-star book out of this series, and it was a bit of a letdown. I don't even know how to necessarily explain it, but I was just expecting more out of this book. This series always has like the greatest concepts and the greatest ideas, and it just doesn't quite go there for me. Like, it stops just short of being amazing. I still love the pacing of this series. Absolutely love it. I love the characters in their very unlikable character sort of ways, and I love the magic system and all of that. Like, there's so much great about this series. It's good. It's a really good series, but it's not quite great for me yet. I'm hoping. I've heard not as great things about The Blood Marrow, which is the next book in the series. I'm still excited to read it. I'm just really hoping that The Burning White, which is coming out soon, which is the 5th book in the series, ends up being amazing. Like, I'm hoping that one ends up being amazing and blows my mind, and then I can finally like really, really love the series for what it is. But as of right now, it's just a solid read. Like, it's not amazing, but it's good. It's still really, really good. So the next books that I'm going to talk about is Dragon Keeper and Dragon Haven by Robin Hobb. These are the 1st and 2nd book in the Rainroute Chronicles, which is the 4th series in the Realm of the Elderlings by Robin Hobb. I ended up giving Dragon Keeper 4 stars and Dragon Haven 4.5 stars. So I was super excited for this series as well. My favorite series in the Realm of the Elderlings overall series is the Last Ship Traders trilogy, and this series is kind of following along after the Last Ship Traders trilogy, kind of the same characters. These first 2 books actually don't have too much of those characters from the Last Ship Traders trilogy in them, but I did really enjoy just being back in this world, this side of the world, because it's in a different area than the rest of the Realm of the Elderlings is in. I really enjoyed reading these overall. I did not enjoy them as much as I wanted to. Part of the reason is I just felt like Dragon Keeper just kind of felt like half a book. It didn't feel like a whole book. Together, they felt like one whole book that I could really enjoy. But separately, like, the plot didn't finish in the first book. Like, it got to the end of like the main plot at the end of the second book, which I felt like should have just been one book. I don't know if there's another way for me to explain that. I don't want to go too much in depth about these because I'm doing an entire vlog on this, and it's like the fourth series in a bigger series, so like there's gonna be tons of spoilers if I go into what even these are about. A little while ago, I was watching a video where someone was talking about Dragon Keeper, which is the first book in this series, and they started explaining the summary of it, like just what's on the back of the book, and I immediately got super angry about it because it was spoilers. it was spoilers for the previous series. So that's why I don't want to go too much into this, because there will be spoilers. But if you guys are interested, I will be coming out with a reading vlog for the Rainwell Chronicles like in a week or so, maybe a little bit longer than that. So if you want more of my thoughts on this, you're gonna definitely check that out when it comes out. So now we're gonna move on to the books that I rated 4.5 stars. The first book that I want to talk about is Where the Crawdads Sings by Delia Owens. So this book takes place in the 1960s. A man has gone missing and they find his body in the marsh. Our main character is Kaya Clark, who is kind of known as the Marsh Girl because she lives in the marsh. So she is kind of accused of killing this man. So it's really interesting in some ways because there's a lot of prejudice against her because she lives kind of outside of society a little bit, and there's this court case going on basically, especially towards the end, and we're not really sure like what happened to this guy and what his relationship with Kaya was and things like that. So it's definitely a very interesting read. I was hoping that I would like it more than I ended up liking it, which is why I only gave it 4.5 stars, but it's definitely incredibly interesting. It's set in a really interesting time, and it definitely has this kind of like mystery thriller aspect to it that I really, really enjoyed. So if you haven't read it, I definitely do recommend it. I listened to it on audiobook, and the audiobook is really well produced, so I definitely recommend it. If you just want like a good beach read or like a good travel read, I feel like the audiobook is just a really great option. So do highly recommend that one. I really, really enjoyed it. The next book that I want to talk about that I rated 4.5 stars is Call It What You Want by Brigid Kemmerer. I really enjoyed this book as well. So it's following two characters. One of them, Rob, has a father who recently got caught doing something he shouldn't have been caught doing and tried to kill himself. The other character, Megan, is kind of like a little bit of a nerd, and she's very driven, and she got caught cheating on the SATs. So it's two characters that kind of have this kind of looming thing hanging over them, and if you've read any of other Brigid Kemmerer's books, then you know where this is going, because obviously they work through some of these issues with each other, and I really, really enjoyed it. I love all of Brigid Kemmerer's books. She just writes them in such a way that it's so much fun to read, and like there are some romantic contemporaries that I just can't do. Like they don't work for me. But for some reason, every time Brigid Kemmerer writes one, I just absolutely love it. I didn't end up giving it 5 stars because I just didn't feel as invested in it as I have with some of her past books. But overall, I still really, really enjoyed it, and I gave it 4.5 stars. The next book that I want to talk about is The Golden Compass by Pullman. This is all 3 books in one. I ended up reading only the first book in the series so far. I really, really enjoyed it. Like really enjoyed it. I'm really excited to continue on with this series. I really love the main character, Lyra, and I love Pantalaimon. Like, I love Pantalaimon so much. And I love this world. It's so interesting. And I really want to know what dust is. I'm so excited to continue on with this series. I have the audiobook for The Subtle Knife, which is the second book in the series, on hold at my library. So I should be getting that in like a month's time and continuing on. But like, I'm so excited. I don't want to talk too much about it. You guys probably know more about this than I do because I'm super late on the bandwagon, His Dark Materials. But overall, really, really enjoyed it. Ended up giving it 4.5 stars and cannot wait to continue on. The next book that I want to talk about is Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. So many people have been telling me that I need to read this book. Like, so many people have been telling me that, and I waited so long, but I finally read it, and oh my gosh, it's so good, guys. It is so well done. Okay, so the Shadow and Bone duology, I liked, but I didn't love. Like, it had all the elements to it that I should have loved, but I didn't like the way it was done. Like, I didn't like the characters, and I didn't like their relationships. In this one, it's like the exact opposite. Like, the setup and all of that is everything that I really wouldn't like. Like, I don't care about heists and like gangs and things like that, but I love the characters. The characters are so well done, and I love their relationships. It felt like a completely different author that wrote this than the Shadow and Bone trilogy. Like, it feels like a completely different author, and I absolutely enjoyed this. I love every single one of these characters, and I cannot wait to read Crooked Kingdom, which I will definitely be getting to in August. But yes, so excited about the next book in the series, and I really enjoyed this one. If you like the series, let me know who your favorite character is down in the comments, because I cannot choose. I'm having such a hard time choosing. Probably Kaz though, maybe. We'll see. It depends on the next book in this series, but yes. Really enjoyed this one. So now we're gonna move on to the books that I have rated 5 stars. And the first one I want to talk about is The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. I've actually vlogged the last week in which I read this, so I will be posting that vlog soon. So if you want to get more of my in-depth opinions on it, you can definitely watch that vlog. But I don't know what I was expecting going into this book, because for some reason I was putting this book off and putting it off and putting it off. Finally decided to pick it up, and it's really good. Like, it was a lot better than I was expecting it to. I was a little disappointed at the ending. Teensy disappointing at the ending, just because I wanted more closure than that, but like, life is not a wish granting factory. So yeah, there's that. But overall, I love John Green's voice in this. I love the characters. I loved the plot of it. So well done. I feel like hitting myself for not reading this book sooner, because I should have read this book last year when I first bought it, when I wanted to read it, but I just kept putting it off because, you know, it's a YA contemporary, and I always put off YA contemporaries, but I should stop doing that because this was amazing. It was so good, and I'm really glad that I ended up reading it. The next book that I want to talk about is The Girl Who Played with Fire by Stieg Larrson. This is the second book in the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo series. I enjoyed this book so much. It was so well done. I love this book even better than the first book in this series, and I think the main reason for that is that this one just felt like it was getting more personal than the first book was. And the first book got pretty up close and personal, but this one got personal in a different way, and I loved the way that this one got personal. I love the characters, absolutely love the characters. I love how complex these characters are and how complex their relationships are, and I'm super excited to see what happens in the next one. Like, I cannot wait. I have the audiobook on hold at my library, and it's taking forever. I'm gonna get it in like a month's time because I have to wait that long. I might end up picking up the book before the third book in the series before that, but I'm trying to wait for the audiobook just because I go through the books a lot faster when I have the audiobooks to switch back and forth between them. So yeah, super excited about it. By the way, the audiobook for this series is so good. I love the audiobook narrator. I think it's Simon Vance, and I didn't realize, but there are other books by him, other audiobooks by him that I've read, and I really enjoy that narrator as an audiobook narrator. So highly recommend the audiobooks for this series if you haven't read them. The next book that I want to talk about is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. Oh my gosh, this book was such a surprise. I also vlogged my experience with this book in the same vlog as The Fault in Our Stars. I don't know what I was expecting going into this book, but it wasn't what I was expecting it to be. One thing you have to understand about me is I love multiple worlds. That is a trope that I just absolutely adore. And this book revolves around the multiple worlds theory in physics, and it was just so well done. So well done. Scientifically, I loved how scientific it got, but like, there was this thriller aspect to it that just kept me so engaged in this story, and I couldn't put it down. Like, I read it so quickly. I actually listened to the audiobook for most of it. I didn't listen to it the whole time, just because there was a time when like I was supposed to be reading physically, and I just decided to pick up a physical book instead of just listening to the audiobook. I had planned to listen to the audiobook all the way through, but I decided to pick up the physical book because I didn't want to switch to whatever physical book I was reading at the time, because I was just so attached to the book at the time. The ending was not my favorite. Like, I don't know how he could have ended it differently without adding like another 100 pages to the book, but like, I would have been okay with another 100 pages. Like, I would have been totally down for it. It was a little anticlimactic in my opinion, but overall I still really enjoyed it, and I ended up giving it 5 stars. And now for the books that I enjoyed the most in the month of July. Finally going to talk about Golden Fool and Fool's Fate by Robin Hobb. So these two are the second and third book in the Taunting Man trilogy by Robin Hobb, which is the third trilogy in the Realm of the Elderlings. If you guys have been keeping track through this video, yes, I read 4 books from the Realm of the Elderlings series in the month of July. I was just really into it at the time, okay guys? I was really into it, and I wanted to continue on with it. So yes, the Taunting Man trilogy was so good. Like, it was the fastest of all the trilogies that I've read in that series, and I didn't expect to love it as much as I did, because Fitz is the main character of this trilogy, and I didn't love him that much in the last trilogy. I ended up liking him like towards the end of that trilogy, but at the beginning I really didn't care for him very much. But I loved him in this series, and I loved how the series ended. Like, it was done so well, and I cannot wait for the next one. Like, I was reading the end of Fool's Fate, and I just wanted it to be longer because I just wanted to continue reading. Like, I didn't want to stop. But of course, like, the book ends eventually. But luckily for me, there's a whole nother 3 books following these characters, so I'm super excited to finally get to those. Really, really, really enjoyed the Tawny Man trilogy. Definitely one of my favorite trilogy in the entire realm of the Elderlings, and probably one of my favorite trilogies of all time as well. So really, really enjoyed this and cannot wait to continue on with this series as well. So those are all the books that I read in the month of July. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. If you have read any of these books, if you liked any of these books, or if you hated any of these books, let me know down in the comments. I would love to discuss it with you guys. I post videos frequently on this channel, so consider subscribing. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up to support my channel. All social media links are in the description down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!